timeline. I don't know how basic you want me to get, so maybe super basic.
Just know how to tweet. That's the main thing.
Sure.
Syntax, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like,
How
do we add people to? Yeah, I don't. All right.
Do you have a Twitter account?
Well, it'll take 5 minutes. I would promise us some time. And plus, we didn't do a live demo last time around, so this is perfect. Here's your own personal page. So, pretend, this is like your Facebook page or your LinkedIn profile. You own this spot. People have different. There's a new version rolling out to make it look more like Facebook. This is the older interface. Tweets are, of course, how many messages you put out. Here's how many people I'm subscribed to. Here's how many people that are subscribed to me. Here's a message that our team put out for Nifty today, just about an hour ago. Thank you to our judges and presenters at. So this is the person that I want to talk to. And here's my picture that I added to that. You have 140 characters here. These are everything you write will always be public on your timeline. So it'll always show up on your personal page. However, Joseph, you can see my message doesn't show up on. And that's because my message to Joseph went onto his notifications page, which is kind of the behind the scenes of your Twitter profile. This is where anybody that's talking to you, their messages will pop up. So it's always public on their profile, but you choose whether you want these messages to actually show up on your personal page or not. So, for example, Inspiring Kitchen said, thanks for following me, blah, 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 blah. It's a little bit commercial, right? They're definitely, want to do business with us. And I'm probably not going to retweet it because it doesn't really belong on my profile or my message. But, Palmetto Equity, on the other hand, this is a message that I want to share because he's kind of endorsing our upcoming gala that's coming up. So I'll press retweet.
So now when someone else looks at your profile, they'll see that message on your thread.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And then he'll be notified that I did that.
Okay.
So now it shows up publicly. And then the other feature is direct messages, which are private messages between you and someone else. You have to be following each other to be able to send direct messages to each other, and that one's not visible to anyone. So, we get a lot of spam, or auto messages, or auto-directed messages, so, we just kind of leave them. But sometimes when we're talking to volunteers, or we're talking to students, or whatever, we take it offline. The last, I think, most interesting thing is like this. This allows you to organize conversations, and they can be private or public. So we have all these lists.
Are those just hashtags?
No. So lists are created by, you just press create list. I'll say example list. Chicago notables. I can choose to keep it public, or I can choose to keep it private. And I'm probably going to keep it private. I'll save my list, and then I'll go and find people to add to this. So, Jim, for example, is a Chicago notable, let's say. So I'll add him to my list, and then every time I come onto Twitter, I can easily look at my list, and I'll see all of Jim's, when it populates, all of only Jim's tweets, or whoever I've selected. Maybe it's Ann Dwyer claims, and maybe it's, I don't know, some Google, CEOs. But I might be following 1,000 people, but I really want to follow like 10 people, let's say, or I'm really interested in just 10 conversations or 10 people. So I'll add them to a list so I can monitor just their conversations. Just trying to make it easier to see.
There's a lot of sort of obligatory following, like back and forth, right?
Yeah.
And so then you keep your list of people you actually care about,
Yep.
rather than people you just don't want to offend.
Yep. And like you can see, what we did is we kind of even organized it further, right? So we follow everybody from Nifty, of course, that have other Nifty chapters across the country. But this just helps me see what's going on across everybody that has a Nifty Twitter account. another list is press. So I can kind of keep an eye on cranes and whatnot and see if there's an interesting conversation that I can join in. So it's all just designed to help me engage in conversations as much as possible. Cool. Any other questions on Twitter?
When you're tweeting whatever the content is it the same content that you're posting stuff on LinkedIn? That you're posting about on LinkedIn?
That's a great question. So my guidelines around that are, have you guys ever seen this? This is kind of how I think about it in terms of, let's say you're talking about a donut, right? So you can always use the same content, and I really advocate that. You're already putting that work in writing that blog post or that tweet or whatever it is, but you can kind of modify it because Twitter is all about real-time interaction. So Twitter would be, I wrote a post on IP valuation at OT Insights. Facebook, which I would not advocate for anything professional related, but you could say, I like this topic. YouTube, you might make a quick video on your blog post, like as an overview. On your LinkedIn, you could say, my, key, 5 key insights on IP valuation over at the OT Insights blog. So things like that. So I always ask and encourage you to modify that content because I'm following you on different networks for a reason. I'm following you on Twitter maybe because I like your personality and I like your insights. But if you're going to blast me and I follow you on all 4 channels with the same message, it'll feel spammy to me. So just tweak it a little bit for each platform. It's a little bit more work.
It's a lot of platforms.
This is a lot of platforms. But this is one of my favorite ways to explain the different
I
platforms.
love the Google Plus one. I'm a Google employee.
And Google Plus is going through a lot of changes actually right now. I think they lost their head.
Do people use that?
No.
Google employees. Yeah.
I'm making Google Plus
It was just horrible.
YouTube worse.
But I think I sent Matt and Monica an article on Google Plus like a month or 2 ago from the New York Times, and it's so integrated in our lives that, like, what was the other thing that I was talking about? Like those endorsements or those plus ones, it'll matter over time. Where Google's forcing you to have a Google Plus page. So, does that help with that question?
One last thing. Sorry with Twitter. I'm sorry.
2 or 3.
So when you, the difference between like a direct message and a reply tweet, so who's going to see what is kind of what I'm...
So you and I can have a direct message that no one else will see.
Okay.
But if I reply to your question, everybody on my timeline can see it, but only you can see it. My reply.
Okay, okay.
So my reply will show up
In your feed.
over here. My reply to you will show up in here.
Okay.
And if you think it's pretty awesome, you can retweet it and put it on your
Make it public. Gotcha. Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Any other
Mom's going to be
questions?
so proud of you.
How do you feel like it ranks in terms of a business development tool compared to LinkedIn?
That's a great question.
2013.
Twitter for PR opportunities, or being able to engage in real-time conversations at conferences is extremely valuable. LinkedIn is great for a more slow burn kind of lead development or lead nurturing area. I think some of my recommendations would be is even if you reach out to 3 people that you know on Twitter every week, and just engage in some dialogue, like, hey, are you going to go to South by Southwest? Or if you reach out to 3 new people, in addition to that, like someone maybe at a trade publication, or an editor, or you might have something to contribute to some sort of IP discussion. As personal as you can get, and knowing that you have relatively limited time, that's probably where you'll find the most value. Or you're at a conference and you can participate in a hashtag conversation. Any other questions? So going towards that question though, is kind of talking about how to kind of generate leads or prospects or use Twitter effectively. You need to have an account. And we talked a little bit about this in the past session, private versus public. I'd encourage you, if you have a lot of off-work activity, to have your own private account. And to have maybe more of a public one for work and keep it locked, your private one locked. I've seen some of you, as I've studied your profiles, some people have public profiles and have everything from like work, family, life, and things that are going on at OT, to people having 2 separate accounts. And there's no right or wrong.
Is for Twitter you're talking about?
For Twitter. It just depends on how comfortable you are about being public about your off-work life.
How comfortable the world is with knowing about your off-work life.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's something to say about having a Twitter account and having a personality. So you don't be only posting links to stuff. You want to have some type of, oh, this is a real person, not just a robot trying to self-promote. So it's like good to have some stuff, but you don't want to be like, oh, I'm at the bar tonight, and for the next 6 nights, oh, I'm at this bar. Just be yourself, but don't be yourself, basically.
What are you trying to say? I drink too much? Yes, I know.
It's a really fine line. I do encourage having a strong point of view, at least in your work profile or whatever profile you have, because that's why people want to do business with you. If I just talked vaguely about social media, I would never have been hired by OT, or I would not be here today, right? I have a point of view that, Twitter and LinkedIn and blogging can help grow your business or help you gain visibility. And likewise, there's a lot of people in your industry in particular that don't have a point of view. And I think it's because there's a lot of concern about, what will my boss think? How about if this comes up in court? All these different things. But I totally agree with that. Have some sort of personality, because if you're not interesting, I have thousands of other people to potentially follow. So there's got to be a reason to follow.
So along that, on that last point, and I don't know if Roy talked about this or it just came up in the first hour at all, but having a point of view does have those risks that you just highlighted. But it makes what you're saying certainly more interesting and engaging. So what did Roy or anyone else comment on?
Yeah, we talked about that.
Okay, so
Right, kind of having an opinion.
and what did he say? Don't have an opinion.
Don't have the definitive.
Yeah, don't make it definitive.
Just say
Don't.
this is an
This is
interesting.
understand.
Okay, just it's an interesting question that we discussed. Okay.
Yeah, you have to have an opinion though, right? I mean, what value are you adding by sitting on the fence? I don't know. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think the official OT policy, as I was told by Samantha, is definitely not to take
A stand on
report on facts and what people said, but do not take a stand, which really grinds my gears.
Right.
It grinds mine too. I mean, like that's the biggest problem we have with the OT Twitter is that they don't want to say anything about anything that's going on in the industry or even like any cases, because it can always come back. So we're very limited. But I think that that's overly cautious because it's the brand's Twitter and it's Jim's Twitter. But in your own personal Twitter, I think it's fine to say, oh, I found this interesting, or this is a good viewpoint, or I may agree with this if I had more information, or just something that's vague but not fluff. Because it can easily be like, oh, this is an article, read it, but you want to put something that about it, like, oh, I worked on this case at one point in time, or I worked on a similar case and I found this point of view to be, intriguing or something like that.
Right. And I think that's a really good point. Like, you have a limited audience. Your IP officers or IP counsels, they're in the know of these things. So being, the ability to be relevant to them or having some sort of opinion or some sort of, interesting nuggets will help you set apart from, Charles River and Associates, for example, or anybody else out there in the market.
Roy, what are your thoughts if, let's say, Supreme Court case is going to change, some new patent reform issue or something like that? We have an opinion.
I mean, normally on something that significant, we would run it through Christie. And I don't think that Christie's overly particular who, for example, if that's going to be a blog post or however we plan to do it. is going to get out there. But I think it's worth running it by her, for example. I think it's something we should do, but I think it's, especially the first couple times we do it, right? And then you kind of get the flavor for how much we're willing to stretch on an opinion, because we're going to have an opinion, right? But it's not going to hurt to get the approval.
When in doubt, do it through legal, right? But I think another good way too is a blog post, actually. I mean, there you can take a little bit more liberty versus 140 characters where it could be left to all sorts of different interpretations. Like if you could write a quick blog post, not quick, there's no such thing as a quick blog post, but you know, if you could write a little bit more meat to it. Where LinkedIn might be a better opportunity for you to talk because there's unlimited characters there. Not unlimited, but there's a lot more. So here's how I would go about using your Twitter account to find and prospect and connect with influencers and potential leads. You need to have an account. We need to have some sort of baseline content, whether that's 1 tweet a day or 5 tweets a week. I really push for consistency no matter what. So commit to something or some sort of schedule. You want to build your community, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. You want to identify influencers. The reason why you have a Twitter account is for exactly that reason. You need to have a reason to be on Twitter and to be able to share something meaningful to an audience. Your purposes could be to build your brand, it could be to get more PR for yourself, for your firm, or it could be to connect, and network while you're at conferences or other events in your industry. So, you can do something as simple as upload your current email list and find those people and follow them, or you can be a little bit more targeted. And then use messaging, retweeting, mentioning, or direct messaging to actually connect with people and converse with people. And then, as I said with LinkedIn, you always want to follow up offline. If there's a good opportunity or you're having a great conversation, it's very rare nowadays in our digital world that we actually send a note, or we call, or we schedule a call. I'm sure it's very important to your business as it is in mine. So follow up offline, because those actions will have more weight. One good way and free way to build your community is using a service like Tweetbee. It's a very funny name, but it allows you to set certain criteria for followers. So I'm looking for IP officers, maybe they're at Motorola and Google and Boeing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can find the people that are on there and then follow them through this. And it's just kind of a third-party tool that helps you quickly identify people that might be relevant. I always do these things as manually as possible. Twitter has limits on how many people you can follow a day or how many people you can unfollow. But having 100 here, compared to LinkedIn, having 100 relevant followers is way better than having 10,000 people that have no interest in it. LinkedIn, I think for exposure, it's good to have bigger networks. For Twitter, though, you have more focused content. It's also very timely. If you don't answer within 24 hours, much less 2 hours, you're going to be forgotten. So it's better to have more relevancy here. Keys to establishing a relationship with influencers and participating in hashtags. You can use something like Listorious, or you can use something like Zulia to find influencers in your market, or also relevant hashtags. Listorious has all sorts of data too on different hashtags, like is IP valuation better or intellectual property better? These are the things and topics that you can identify through using these tools. They're all free. Listorious has paid subscriptions, and there's other tools beyond this too. You want to follow people on Twitter, you can add them to a list. So let's say there's 3 major publications in your industry. Create a list for them. When you see something interesting, you can add your nugget and retweet it, or you can reply, or you can start a conversation to it. So those are kind of my basic steps. Monitor tweets for opportunities to engage, tweet someone a personalized message, and then of course I always encourage offline interaction. And things that you can do are custom backgrounds. You can use Bitly for analytics. Often I encounter this question: is this just a waste of time? I'm linking to a white paper or a journal or a blog post. Are people even reading it? Bitly is a link shortening service that can help you answer those questions. You can also create ebooks and white papers. As many calls to actions as you can do, the better. For example, at SoMe we use phone tracking. Now, it doesn't really apply to Twitter as much, but if someone does give us a call from our social media networks, we can track that they called us from the track line. Any questions around this? Tweet timing and influence matters. There are literally millions of tweets that can come up in a second, or every time you hit the refresh button. So knowing when your audience is online is key, especially if you're very focused on building a Twitter audience or community. Tools like Social Bro, which is that second one right there, allow you to get advanced analytics and help you figure out who are my influencers, who are the people that are actually listening to my messages, and when are they online so I can tweet at the appropriate times. It could be that you'll schedule tweets for the morning and evening. It could be that people are listening to you on Friday afternoons. But knowing that helps you create messaging that doesn't just exist in a silo. Here's some of my favorite tools for you to use. Sprout Social is a paid service. It's a little bit heavy for a personal user. I'd say Hootsuite is probably a better alternative. It's free. Social Bro is something that helps you get advanced analytics about your Twitter. TweetDeck helps you build community and people to follow. TweetDeck is a good service to use to manage chats as well. So there's just a lot of different tools out there that you can use to help you harness Twitter. It's a full-time, of course, it's a full-time job, as I know. So, and you really do a lot. You can do a lot with Twitter. It's just as whatever you make out of it. This is an example of a hashtag conversation. We can go a little bit deeper into this. I think we covered it pretty well in our one-on-one session. But here's all the conversations around IP valuation. So it's great, as OT, as a brand, to have presence in this hashtag, especially for your group. And perhaps every month to add something to this conversation. I don't know how often you update OT insights, your blog, or create new videos, but they'd be great to tag and add to this conversation. Any questions on hashtags? Twitter chat, we briefly covered this. I looked and searched for a chat for your specific industry, and I haven't seen one. But I think it'd be a great opportunity for OT to have its own Twitter chat. They're relatively easy to set up. The harder part is building the audience to come to it. The first few times that you run this chat, whether it's quarterly or whether it's monthly, it will be a struggle. And I would say seed it with people like your own team to ask questions and to participate, to create some activity around it. But it can become very, very meaningful. Twitter chats, because they're real time, because you have the opportunity to ask questions and engage in conversations, is probably one of the best lead generation techniques out there. It gives your brand a lot of visibility.
I'm sorry, what did you say was one of the best lead generation?
Twitter chats.
Twitter chat, you believe that? Okay.
Because I think about your industry, it's engineers, it's technology people. They're already on Twitter, they're on social media. They're looking for opportunities to engage. And there's not very many opportunities on Twitter to really talk about, let's say, IP or patents or whatever it is that you want to engage in. The problem, though, always is getting it started. And that's the harder part.
And what are the character limitations in the chat?
140.
Well, particularly if,
So you can kind of see this is a...
particularly if we can't express an opinion. I mean, how are we going to discuss anything?
And once again, there's nothing wrong with expressing opinions. And Cecil, as you were saying before, it's what people expect us to do. The only thing I've cautioned against is taking definitive stances that could come back to bite you. There's a way to give to put out an opinion that engages whoever is involved in the chat to respond. It's more you're stating an opinion, but you're also fostering a conversation. And I'd rather that you foster a conversation with the start of an opinion or a thought than pound the table and say, this is mine and OT's stance. There's just no need to go that far. So I think just thinking about how you make an intelligent position or a question so that you will get, and you, just as a starting point, see what the responses are, and how can you help foster that discussion a little bit. And sometimes it may end up in just a one-on-one conversation offline with somebody who says, you know what, this is really interesting, just call me offline, right? So
is there any, we'll see a lot of people who are, we'll come across a lot of people on Twitter who, as part of their sort of bio, they'll say something to the tune of, opinions are my own or not reflective of the company. Is there any usefulness to doing that in our case?
Yeah, I recommend that too. I don't know how much that'll protect you necessarily in like a deposition or whatnot, but I see that often, and I think it's a good tactic. So there's no risk to not adding that to your profiles. I also think, like, with the Twitter chat, how can you serve as a moderator versus, having to actually or actively engage? Perhaps you guys can come up with a list of questions, and there's people in the industry that contribute answers to those. For example, like this, this is a moderated chat about South Asian women in sports. It's one of my friends. I think she does a great job running this chat. She started in February with virtually no audience and has quickly built it because it's a niche. It's a topic that people are interested in talking about to a nice-sized audience, where she's getting ESPN and CNN, all these folks contributing to her monthly chats. And she's using something called Tweet Chat to moderate it. So you get all the questions, you can write responses, you can moderate. You can at least keep track of the conversations, because sometimes these things happen very, very fast.
Okay.
And ways to promote this: company email, your blog, your website, just your Twitter handles too. Links. I think there was a question just about links, or talking about links. You can always just type in a link, and Twitter will automatically shorten it for you. If you use a third-party service, it'll assign or shorten the link. Like if you use Hootsuite, it'll have OW in front of it, so it can kind of keep track of that link and what happens with it. Or you can use one of my favorite services, which is Bitly. I mean, it's free. There is a premium service as well, but that shortens your links. Just remembering that all these links come against your character limit. So if you add a link and a picture and all this other stuff, you'll quickly run out of room. We were able to briefly cover this, but a lot of the questions I get is, what do I even tweet about? And I think it's keeping it simple, short and sweet is key. You've attended a conference, there's an interesting insight, share it. Maybe take a quick video and just post it of someone speaking. It can be very, very simple. It can be very complicated too. You can have a very deep insight about patents, and feel free to share it. But you can kind of see some things that I came up with. You can see what other people have come up with. Questions are great, but questions to an audience that no one's participating in is a little bit tough to swallow. So see if you can answer any questions out there. Some blogging basics I wanted to cover. This is really tough, and I don't know how much interest there is in this room to blog, but you have access to much research, a lot of information between you and your team and your own experience. So I would recommend that if anyone is writing a personal blog, it's most likely for your personal brand, and it will eventually benefit OT. But I would start with keyword research. Google has a bunch of tools that help you figure out what the search volume is on any given topic. So if asset impairment is something that's really interesting, or patent valuation is something that's interesting to you that you want to write about, see how many people are even searching for it. If it's an audience of one, it might not be worth your time and effort to write about it. Maybe there's a broader topic that you can write about. You don't have to have your own WordPress site. You can use the unused Google Plus as a platform to blog. You can post a free blog on WordPress.com. There's just a lot of ways to go about actually setting up that blog. There's Squarespace, there's Wix, if you want your own personal blog. Or you can also, if there's a blog or a publication that you read often, you can pitch a submission of your own, which might be the easiest and fastest way for you to gain that visibility. Sustainability. blogging weekly is the route to go to actually build up an audience and traffic to your own personal website if you're going to do it on your own. I would start with shorter posts. Yeah, as much as I think we, as social media consultants, advocate 250 word posts, they don't really work that well, because how much can you really say in 250 words? We do find that posts that are over 2,000 words work the best for search engine optimization, actual